horror movies. I love them.
I love them too. That's an amazing coincidence. What are the possibilities?
Who are you? I'm John.
I'm Spencer. It's good. Yeah, we should talk about some horror films.
movies.
Yeah.
What would you say are your top 5 horror movies of all time, Spencer?
Oh my God, that's so awesome that you talked about that just because it just occurred to me what they are.
Really, what do you say we count them down in order from least favorite to favorite?
Right now?
Right now.
Oh my God, this is so awesome. I can't wait.
All right. So, Spencer, your number 5 horror film of all time.
For my number 5, I picked a film that I know there's probably going to be a fair amount of debate about, but I think it achieves a lot of great things, and that is Paranormal Activity. I find Paranormal Activity to be the best of that sort of handy cam, quasi-real,
Like found footage sort of movies.
I like Blair Witch, I like all that kind of stuff, but Paranormal Activity is one of the scariest films for the least amount of money, I mean, probably ever.
Oh, yeah, definitely. What they pulled off for $15,000
was incredible.
And it just shows you what you don't see can be just as scary as what you do see. Now, I definitely don't agree it should be a top 5 movie for me. I think it is very scary, although as a movie, it's good. But I don't think it's, that great thing that would put it into my top 5.
I personally think that some of probably what some people consider its faults are actually some of its strengths. For instance, like I think the fact that they didn't get super sucked into the backstory of what this is and all that. I think keeping it ambiguous is a great thing. I think the couple in the movie.
Yeah, the actors.
The actors were really good. I thought
they were
totally believable.
Solid, yeah.
I mean, I think, the concept really interesting. I love ghosts. Ghosts are one of my favorite things, and you probably will see some coming back later on this list. I just think it's a really fun, scary. I think it's probably one of the scariest films I've ever seen.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. It is that weird thing where it's like it scared the crap out of me, but overall as a movie, really good, but not great.
Yeah, I guess we're going to have to disagree about that.
Yeah, we'll have to agree to disagree.
Yes.
My number 5 movie is from the nature gone amok genre. It arguably kick-started that into high gear, and that was Steven Spielberg's Jaws.
Oh, I thought you were going to say, like, Placid.
No. And it's so interesting to think about Steven Spielberg as this great horror director, but I mean, man, even something in like Close Encounters, the scene where the kid's running around the house and he's going to be abducted, that's horrifying. This guy who is known as like the blockbuster sappy man is a great horror director, and Jaws is absolutely terrifying. I think it's got great performances by everyone involved. Roy Scheider, I don't think was ever better. Robert Shaw, Richard Dreyfuss, I mean, these guys have had amazing careers, but for me, it's just those characters in Jaws are what pops in my head when I think of them.
I love Jaws, and I mean, I can't really criticize having it on this list because it's an amazing film. The only problem for me was the best parts of Jaws were when the shark wasn't on camera, and ultimately you have to go to that crescendo of the shark coming on camera, and that sort of just doesn't carry through.
So you mean the attack scenes themselves were the least interesting part, or
the one at the end?
Okay, you didn't like the way the shark looked.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm fine with the shark.
I mean, I'm not saying something that ruined the movie for me, but I'm saying the best parts were the parts where you couldn't really see what was occurring. You just saw like bits and pieces. And...
Oh no, and I think that's one of the great things about the movie. Much like Paranormal Activity, what you didn't see in Jaws made it even more scary. If you saw the shark the whole time, what would it be? It'd be Lake Placid, where they showed the alligator.
But my only point is that ultimately the climax is seeing the shark, and that's sort of unfortunate. If there were some way, I mean, you had to do it.
Yeah.
But if there's some way you could avoid doing it, I think it would have been just a little better.
Yeah, I guess so. I'm fine seeing the shark. And of course, you get that great scene where Brody's like, smile, you son of a bitch.
You have to do it. I mean, you can't build up to something and then never show it. At least not if it's not a ghost, I guess.
Yeah.
But I think the build up is amazing. Like when they are trying to figure out what this thing is, where it is, how big it is, all that kind of stuff, I think is amazing.
Exactly, and it's something that every nature gone amok movie afterwards would rip off everything about it. Yeah. Not revealing the monster for a long time, the point of view of the monster, the mayor who doesn't want to close the town or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, and it's as you said, it's Steven Spielberg, the schmaltziest director in Hollywood, doing something that, I mean, made him famous, basically.
Yeah, it made him famous, and it shows a kid being eaten by a shark.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine that.
Yeah.
The guy who showed Indiana Jones getting married and ruining the franchise had a kid getting eaten by a shark. Yeah. How far the time can take you.
Yeah.
So what was your number 4, Spencer?
My number 4 is another fairly recent film, one that we've discussed on several occasions, The Descent.
Great film.
By Neil Marshall. The Descent is one of those films that I love the claustrophobic aspects of it, you know, much like, you know, like any of the zombie films we've talked over time, or Assault at Precinct 13, or that kind of film. It's a group of women who go spelunking, looking for good times. They
find horrible monsters.
Yeah, it does not pan out that way. And unlike other films like The Cave, which tackle the same basic premise, this one, again, sort of implies that less is more. Where you see bits and pieces for it, and it's great. I mean...
Yeah, I mean, it's a movie that is scary before the monsters show up. How many movies can say that? Like them crawling through the rocks and there might be a cave-in, stuff like that is horrifying, and that's before any monsters show up, before any blood is spilled.
Again, both this and Paranormal Activity sort of buy into this, things that, like, I think the stuff that is the most plausible is sometimes the most scary. Like, you know, this... I could go spelunking. Man, I don't know if I'd run into, like, creatures, but I would say definitively if
that's true. I would say, you know, running into creatures is more likely than running into a werewolf or vampire.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Same with, you know, like, I can't say that ghosts do or do not exist. I mean, there seems to be a lot of anecdotal evidence. So,
just
I mean,
like maybe cave monsters.
But I don't know anybody who's actually run into a werewolf. I mean, so, I mean, these are things that I foresee theoretically could happen to me, and I find that to be very scary. Yeah,
I mean, I am all about The Descent. It's my favorite modern horror movie of the, you know, kind of there was a little resurgence in the 2000s of solid horror movies, and The Descent, I think, sat at the top. And yeah, just all around good. It makes kind of wish Neil Marshall would get back to horror, because now he's doing action. He's kind of doing the John Carpenter route, going into some action. Hopefully he gets back to some horror sometime soon.
I got faith. Just amazing film.
Well, my number 4 is The Thing, speaking of John Carpenter, the 1982 version. And this is such a great movie. As far as, like, you want to talk about isolation, it's these 12 guys are just on an outpost in Antarctica, and there's nothing around but ice.
Yeah. I mean... It's again one of those things that you're not gonna get help. Like don't even think about help, because there's no possible way you could get help.
And you know, in the midst of these guys is a shape-shifting alien, one of whom, or it can make itself look like the guys, and one of them or more might be the thing, and they have to figure out who to trust, who not to trust.
And I mean, you hear the premise, and yeah, maybe it sounds a little cheesy. A shape-shifting alien who it's basically, it boils down to the same concept as, you know, like 10 Little Indians or any of those Agatha Christie type things. It's like one of these people's a killer. Which one's it going to be? And it is very suspenseful in figuring out who it is. And that is the core of it to me, is the suspense, and you don't know who the killer is, regardless of it's alien or not. That really brings it together. The alien thing just adds some cool gore and stuff like that. Oh,
definitely. And I am a big fan of gore. I like the suspense build-up. I also like the gore. So this has the nice build-up with the gory payoff, and the effects by Rob Bottin are amazing.
Yep, still stand up 30 years later.
Exactly. And there are just some scenes in that movie that just horrify me to no end.
I mean, you got to talk about some great performances. I mean, Kurt Russell, amazing. Frequently, I mean, people forget about this when they talk about him. Talk about, you know, Snake, talk about maybe Backdraft or any number of other things, but sadly, The Thing, overlooked.
That's true. His performance is R.J. McCready, a guy who doesn't want to be the hero, he doesn't want to be in charge, but circumstances force him to, you know, take that mantle.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just a great movie, and it's not afraid to, you know, shock you, whether it be with gore effects or, you know, the killing characters you don't expect to, maybe not wrapping everything up in a nice tiny little bow. So yeah, there's a thing for you.
All right. Well, my number 3 certainly probably will cause controversy, but I'm sticking by. I love the film. It holds up for me, and that is Gremlins. Perhaps not what most people think of when they think of horror films or whatever. I think Gremlins is sort of one of those quintessential changing to a monster kind of movies for me. Like, the original and the sequel are very different films, granted.
Yeah.
But the original, like, starts out nice. Kid gets a nice little cute pet. Turns out the cute pet basically is like a demon when you give it like water, food, and all that other stuff.
Yeah, the rules that they came up with, like the Mogwai, the Gremlins, are like some of the most original creations ever. Yeah. I mean, Chris Columbus's script is very interesting in that it is kind of like starts off nice Americana and then it goes really dark. And I mean, people are killed in gruesome ways. The movie inspired the PG-13 rating because parents were so outraged.
I mean, and you know, Joe Dante.
Yeah, great director.
Yeah. So he deserves an immense amount of credit. There is some sort of a nice sort of line between fun and horrific in the film where the Gremlins are both like evil, but you look at what they do when they're sort of out in the world as these creatures.
It makes me think of like the bar scene, just gremlins being ridiculous and having fun. The whole like flash dance gremlin that shows up and it's like the legs moving. I just crack up uncontrollably every time I see it.
I mean, there's a lot of other interesting aspects, like the whole holiday sort of spin to the movie.
Oh yeah, exactly. One of the best horror movies set on Christmas.
Yeah. So I mean, it is a fun, entertaining film, and I like the monster changing aspect of it. That sort of is what kicks into the next gear because it sort of puts this guy who's completely unprepared again to be a hero has to deal with these little demons going all over his town, taking over the town.
And it inspired a whole subgenre throughout the 80s. You got the Munchies, you got the Ghoulies, even like Killer Dolls came back after Gremlins, made little things popular.
And I mean, I like the sequel, but the original holds a special place in my heart.
Yeah, it wouldn't be in my top 5 or even 10 horror movies, but I love Gremlins. I'm not going to argue with you on that one. My number 3 movie is Halloween from 1978. Once again, directed by John Carpenter, who I'm going to throw out there, the best horror director.
Ooh, that's tough. I don't know. Wes Craven's in that conversation too.
But I mean, I don't know about you. I don't have any Wes Craven movies in my top 5. I have 2 John Carpenters.
That's fair enough. I don't have any. I don't have any I don't have any Wes Craven in my top 5.
So for me, at least, my favorite of all the horror directors is John Carpenter.
He's definitely, I mean, in the top like handful at the very least, without question.
And Halloween was a movie that put him on the map, the most successful independent movie of all time when it came out in the 70s, and held that record for about 12 years.
It made $47 million in 1978, and it only cost $320,000 to make.
Exactly, and that was the days when movie tickets cost $2. You know.
Yeah, if that much.
So a monumental achievement. Like all of these other ones, it spawned so much. Pretty much every horror movie made in the 80s was a slasher movie. And Halloween, you know, wasn't the first. You know, Black Christmas came before, you could argue Psycho before it, but it made it popular. And there are so many great aspects.
I mean, I think of Halloween as the quintessential slasher film. Like, I mean, you can argue any number of ones sort of are in the same one and did it before, same genre and did it before it, but the immediate impact of Halloween is where I think it clearly shows it to be the quintessential one. I mean, you look at like Friday the 13th, it was like popping up right after.
Oh, exactly. Even the, Sean Cunningham has said the impetus for Friday the 13th was he saw Halloween and he told his writer, Victor Miller, rip that off. And that was Friday the 13th.
Yeah.
I mean, they came up with a good ripoff, luckily.
I love Halloween. I mean, Jamie Lee Curtis started her career there, which is great.
Yeah, Donald Pleasance as Dr. Loomis, I would say, in his very illustrious career, that's my favorite of all of his characters. And he came back throughout the sequels.
I mean, the only problem with that is the sequels. That's the only flaw against Halloween, is that they really drag that series through the mud. I feel like that is one of the series that had the least amount of growth. I mean, as weird as it is to sound, like even Friday the 13th had more growth.
It kind of had more going on. You're right about that.
So and you can't fault the original for that, but the original is a great film. That's all you got to say about that. Yeah,
definitely. And just, it's since been sequeled to death, remade to death. None of them even came close to the original. And I like some of the Halloween sequels, but the original is where it's at as far as slasher movies and as far as John Carpenter movies for me personally.
Yeah, it's a good selection. My number 2... I'm gonna be the first one we got, both of us.
Yeah.
And that's The Thing for me.
Good choice. I like that movie.
Yeah, it's a great film. Again, the claustrophobic aspects of it, the questions of who is the killer. I think that is one of the things that I find most suspenseful is sometimes, with like aliens or something like that, it's something out of left field. You don't know what it is. It's killing stuff, but it's just like an alien. I couldn't have possibly known what this is. Ignoring the fact that this is a space shape-shifting alien thing or whatever. It's it's going to be one of these 12 people.
Yeah.
Regardless of what shape it's in, it's one of these 12 people, and that's all it can be. So you look around the room and one of those other people is killing.
Yeah.
And so that's such a suspenseful premise.
Oh yeah.
I also you gotta appreciate the setting it in Antarctica.
It's great. The whole snow is very conducive to horror. I think we'll see later on in our lists. Just the winter setting, or it just makes you feel so trapped. Cities shut down when it snows. At least Seattle does.
Well, that's just it. Like, A, they're in such a remote location that they can't expect help to come to them. And B, even if they wanted to flee, they die. Like, they can't. You can't go out in Antarctica and live. Like, you're dead.
There's nowhere for you to go, and a storm has come in. We have to mention, so they cannot fly out right away.
So that is the ultimate sort of trapped in one place. Probably of all movies, I can't think of any movie that feels even more trapped in one spot.
No, definitely the best. That claustrophobic. Who can you trust? And I would say alien horror. I prefer The Thing even to the Alien series.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Alien is a very good horror film as well, but yeah, this one, Alien, there's the whole just being stalked by something. It's some sort of creature, but you don't know what it is. This, you're looking at all the other people, and one of them is killing you. You know you're a killer.
It'd be like if right now my head split open and bit into your head.
If you were just comparing it, like if you were the alien, it'd be like you were the actual alien sitting next to me, and I'm like, so what's up? And you're like, yeah, one of us is a killer. Yeah. You know which one it is? I don't know. So
we'll just have to podcast and see what happens.
Yeah.
To paraphrase the ending of the movie.
Exactly. So it's an amazing thing. I think the cast they got was great. John Carpenter did a wonderful job. As we spoke of before, the effects held up 30 years later.
Yeah, they're so good. Some of the best practical makeup effects that you will ever see. It's up there with something like An American Werewolf in London or The Howling.
And that is one thing that generally is a fault of horror films, is cheesy effects.
Yeah, they don't have the budget for it, or what at the time they could do doesn't look good later on.
So the fact that it was able to achieve this, bueno, muy bueno.
we like.
It's good. It's very, very good.
So my number 2 movie is The Return of the Living Dead from 1985. This is my favorite zombie movie of all time, and I also think it's one of the most fun movies. I can sit down and watch Return of the Living Dead, and have multiple times during a day. It's just a blast. Dan O'Bannon, one of the only movies he directed, he was famously the writer of Alien and Total Recall, just delivers this just adrenaline rush of a movie. It's zombies versus punk rockers in a cemetery, and he kind of reinvents the whole idea of what a zombie is. People give 28 Days Later all this credit for the running zombies. Return of the Living Dead did it 20 years before that. Running zombies, they talked, they had hair, they, if you hit them in the head, they didn't die. You could not kill these zombies. It's just unrelenting, but at the same time, it's funny and scary, all wrapped up at the same time. You'll find yourself just laughing as hordes of zombies just come out of nowhere and attack somebody, but then once it gets into like the kill scene, you're like, oh my god, like it's revolting.
There's clearly, it's definitely an influence on other films. Obviously Shaun of the Dead, Zombieland, you can see sort of the influence on those films. I agree. I think it's a very good film. It's not that high for me. It's definitely, I think it was on my list of 31, it was somewhere in the middle. I personally don't really love zombie films in general. I appreciate somewhat of the horror, but
I think they're kind of overplayed. I'll agree with you on that.
They're kind of overplayed, and I can't embrace that idea as much as these other ones. Like things that could actually occur to me, I find to be more scary. Things that are like isolation and being trapped and all that kind of stuff, I find to be scarier. I think they're fun films. I don't love them as much. As I said, they're on my list though.
Yeah.
And you're right. It's unfortunate in a lot of ways that Return of the Living Dead doesn't get the credit it probably deserves, because other things like 28 Days Later everybody thinks of when they think of zombie film.
Exactly.
So if you're really gonna give zombie films the true credit they deserve, you gotta go look back, and this is sort of a good place to begin that.
Yeah, definitely. And also one of my favorite film soundtracks in Return of the Living Dead. A lot of great 80s punk artists singing about zombies.
That's pretty cool.
How often can you say a band does that?
Yeah. It's cool. All right. Well, that brings me to my number one.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Drum roll.
And if you've been listening to the list, you might be able to guess what my number one is, and that is The Shining.
Stanley Kubrick.
Stanley Kubrick, based on a Stephen King novel, though it's loosely based on it. You know, The Shining is basically, to me, like The Thing, but even less people and like just as much like lack of hope. But it sort of grows the sort of mythos, and it isn't just one person that's killing them. It's basically an evil entity in the hotel. So it combines sort of like the isolation with like ghosts. Sort of two of my favorite things in one sort of film. I find the hotel in The Shining to be tremendously creepy. Like I it's even watching this film came out 30 years ago, and even looking at it today, like the little girls, the elevator of blood, the
little girls in the hallway is one of the creepiest
was
images
it like
on film.
room 307 or whatever it is he goes into with that creepy woman and stuff
In the tub,
yeah, it's awful. Like and it's uber it builds really well to that end as you watch him increasingly grow crazy. And it's sort of like The Thing, except you know which one is going to kill you. You're watching them get agitated, and there's like virtually nothing you can do about it. And it's amazing. I mean, the sort of claustrophobic family drama that unfolds in this environment is really amazing. And I think the ending that it builds to is a great climax. I think the ending of it is one of the best parts.
Now, this is the part where I always kind of like get into shit with some other horror fans. And that's where I'm going to say I don't dislike The Shining, but I think it might be the most overrated horror movie out there.
Oh, I think there are other films that are probably more overrated.
Pretty much every horror list I see, number 1 or 2 is The Shining, and it wasn't even in my top 31 when I did the list for our website.
Maybe that's just because you don't have good taste in movies.
It might be. I don't know. I like the movie. It does get better the more I watch it. I've liked it much less in the past than I do at this moment. But for me, I think I'm such a fan of Stephen King's book, and I think the things that worked really well in the book, they failed in the movie. Like the whole point of the book, I thought, was it was about this loving father slowly losing his humanity. And in The Shining, Jack Nicholson is crazy from frame 1. You see him and the dude is messed up. Well, like there's no progression.
I think you're kind of undercutting it a little bit. I mean, he has problems, agreed, but he also part of the whole reason they're doing this is so that he can sort of get back to being a good father and all this other stuff. That's part of the reason why they go to this hotel.
But when they go, he's obviously kind of unhinged, just the way that Jack presents himself and the way he acts in the movie, just the way he chose to give that performance. In the Shining book, there had been, he'd had some problems in the past, but at that moment, he was at the best he had been in years, and then you slowly see this devolution into going back to his bad ways and worse.
I mean,
that was something that I think Kubrick he wasn't really interested in even getting across in the movie, and that's a problem that King had.
I feel like it did come across. I mean, they've made other adaptations, like they made one for TV with
Stephen King wrote,
which was much more authentic to the original book, I believe.
Yeah, it was closer to the book. The problem it had was that Kubrick wasn't directing it, and some of the things that Kubrick added, like a lot of the scare ideas that weren't in the book, stuff like the maze or some of the imagery that he came up with, I think was what was lacking in that miniseries.
I just also think that like the things that were scary were done better by Kubrick. I mean, even the things that were the same, like the elevator, the evil girls, all that stuff. Like, I personally prefer the Kubrick version.
I would say I prefer it too. I just out of all of them, the novel is where I would go for The Shining.
I mean, maybe it's not as authentic, but I think I think it's an amazing sort of claustrophobic atmosphere, and I still find Hotel somewhat creepy because of that film. So,
all right, well, my number one movie, can you do the drum roll? I can't do it. Is 1981's An American Werewolf in London, which was directed by John Landis, up to that point known as a comedy director. And what he was able to do with American Werewolf in London was really give you a lot of great character development before the horror happens, and he did that through his great understanding of comedy. I mean, there's just funny scenes between David Naughton and Griffin Dunne, and you just come to really know these characters, and then this horrific thing happens, and the horror is really scary. Like, it's not one of these horror comedies where the whole time it's kind of played tongue-in-cheek. I mean, the scene where they're out on the moors and the wolf is circling them is horrifying.
Yeah.
And then there's some amazing makeup effects. I mean, they created the Oscar for Best Makeup Effects for An American Werewolf in London. It was in competition, you know, every year after that. And it's amazing. The werewolf transformation, even just the gore effects of the friend Jack coming back from the dead to warn David what's going to happen to him, and he's slowly decomposing more and more every time he shows up. I totally love it. Werewolves are my favorite movie monsters. And the movie is just so much fun, but it's also a tragedy. I mean, it's one of the only movies where I can laugh hysterically and get really upset at the characters I love being killed. And I mean, John Landis didn't really go back much to the horror genre. Yeah. He always had more of a comedic bent, or things like Michael Jackson's Thriller. He also did Innocent Blood, much more had comedy going on to it. But I think the guy is a solid horror director. And this one movie just shows it.
It was solid. Again, it's much like Return of the Living Dead. I like it a lot, but it's not as high on my list. I mean, part of it probably boils down to the fact that I don't love werewolves as much as you do. Like, I find them to be one of the lesser things, and usually that's because they're done so poorly. I mean, there's
a lot of bad werewolf movies.
This does it probably amongst the best, but even that I'm still not blown away by. I mean, it never sort of goes the places I would want a werewolf movie to go. And I mean, that's tough to do.
Where would you want it to go besides a dude turns into a werewolf and eats people?
But I mean, just like the effects and stuff like that. I mean, it does very solid effects given the time and all that stuff. Even still, they're pretty good.
Yeah.
But you know, like, it gives you the bits of it, but you don't really get like full-on werewolf experience, and that's sort of what I would like to see. You know, I feel like something like an Underworld type movie where werewolves are like I'm not saying that the werewolves in Underworld are better. I'm just saying, like,
so you want them to be hairless and look like panthers?
I want more perspective of that sort of werewolf experience. You know, like something like Wolf, like where you experience the guys sort of going through the process of becoming a werewolf.
Have you seen An American Werewolf in London recently?
Yes.
You're describing what the movie is.
Yes, but I want. Maybe I'm not explaining itself well. I like it does a lot of the sort of presenting it, but I just want more of the experience, more of the sort of, to me, it's sort of like becoming a vampire, you know. And yes, there is a lot of that, but there's a lot more of the side characters and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I don't know. This is an argument you're not. I can't be convinced on.
No, I know you love the film. I'm not saying that. It's just for what I imagine, and I probably have not done a good job describing what I want from a werewolf, but it gets as close as any film. But given that they're sort of fantastical creatures,
yeah,
I need more. Is my point.
Okay, yeah. For me, I mean, the only thing missing to me from this movie is a two-legged werewolf. I love werewolves, and it's a four-legged werewolf in this movie as opposed to the two-legged
That's what
variety.
I'm saying, you know. I want sort of like a let the right one in of werewolves, where you sort of get the full werewolf experience, and I mean, you don't get that with this entirely. You get as close as pretty much any film, but you just don't get the whole enchilada.
I would argue you get the whole enchilada and some horchata to wash it down. So there you have our individual top 5 lists of the best horror films of all time. Let us know what you think. Were we crazy? Did you understand Spencer's explanation of werewolves? Let us know what you think at MacGuffinPodcast.com. And you can also find the full MacGuffin writing staff list of the top 31 horror movies. Some of our movies, do they appear on it? Are they as high as we put it? Who knows? You'll have to look and find out.
Yeah. Stay tuned.
T-1000 can't stop me. I'm on fire tonight. Magneto can't stop me. I'm on fire tonight. Even Zod can't stop me. I'm on fire tonight. It's tight, don't even try to bite the side of style. Mr. Spock can't stop me. I'm on fire tonight. The Wrath of Khan can't stop me. I'm on fire tonight. The Borg can't stop me. I'm on fire tonight. Because I've got space game and it feels alright.